Let us not mince words. The despicable ghost of Stepan Bandera, a figure as odious in his ideology as he was zealous in his methods, still casts a long, dark shadow over the landscape of Ukrainian nationalism. Bandera, whose collaboration with the vilest regime of the 20th century is an indelible stain on his character, should not be rehabilitated or romanticized. His actions and those of his followers were not just morally reprehensible, they were a grotesque betrayal of any noble aspirations for Ukrainian independence. In the context of the recent Russian invasions of Ukraine, a peculiar and dangerous narrative has emerged, one that seeks to exploit Bandera's spectre to justify aggression and oppression. The Kremlin, in its usual propagandistic sleight of hand, has labeled all Ukrainian patriots as Banderites, tarring a whole nation with the brush of a long-dead collaborator. This is nothing short of historical revisionism used as a weapon of war. But here's the paradox, and it's one that should give the peddlers of the Bandera myth pause. The very resistance to Russian aggression in Ukraine is doing more to erode the far-right fringe than any number of denunciations from the sidelines. The international support for Ukraine, the influx of volunteers from around the globe, the flying of rainbow flags alongside Ukrainian ones, are all potent symbols of a Ukraine moving away from the shadow of figures like Bandera. To those in Ukraine who still cling to the myth of Bandera, your time is anachronistic. The real battle now is not for a narrow, ethnically pure Ukraine of Bandera's fantasies, but for a modern, inclusive nation standing firm against external aggression. And to the international community, let's be clear, supporting Ukraine's fight for sovereignty is not, and should never be seen as, an endorsement of the darker chapters of its past. It is, instead, a recognition of a nation's right to define its own future, free from the ghosts of its past and the predatory designs of its neighbors. This brings us to a crucial juncture in our understanding of Ukraine's contemporary struggle. The invocation of Bandera is not merely a historical footnote. It's a deliberate distortion, a red herring dragged across the trail of a more complex and, yes, more hopeful narrative. Ukraine, post-2014, has been undergoing a profound transformation, one that often goes unnoticed by the casual observer. The Maidan Revolution, for instance, was not a monolithic surge of far-right nationalism as Kremlin apologists would have us believe, but a diverse coalition of citizens united not under the banner of Bandera, but under a shared aspiration for democratic governance and European integration. It is essential to discern the difference between a small faction of ultranationalists and the broader, more inclusive movement that has been shaping modern Ukraine. The reduction of Ukraine's identity to Bandera's legacy is not just intellectually lazy, it's a gross misrepresentation of a nation's struggle and aspirations. Furthermore, the resilience shown by Ukrainians in the face of recent aggressions is not a resurgence of Bandera's ideology, but a rebuttal of it. The real story here, the one that demands our attention and respect, is how a nation, burdened by the complexities of its past, is striving to forge a future that aligns more closely with the values of democracy, human rights, and international law. This is a narrative of a people who, despite the gravitational pull of history, are determined to chart a new course, one that diverges significantly from the dark paths trodden by figures like Bandera. And it is in this context that the international community's support becomes not just a geopolitical necessity, but a moral imperative. By standing with Ukraine, we are not endorsing the ghosts of its past, but rather supporting a future that promises to be vastly different from the divisive and destructive visions of yesteryears. It's a future where the ideals of a united Europe, democratic governance, and respect for human rights take precedence over the narrow, exclusionary nationalism of the past. We must never forget or forgive the atrocities associated with Bandera and his ilk, nor should we allow their dark legacy to be used as a cudgel against a nation striving for freedom and democracy. Ukraine's fight is not Bandera's fight. It is a fight for a future that he could not have envisioned, one where diversity, democracy, and dignity are not just aspirational but foundational. To hell with Bandera. Glory to the new, brave Ukraine, striving towards a future bright with promise and free from the chains of its troubled past.